What matters in innovation is this is something new in a given context. So it can be something totally new for the world. And for instance, when you got the iPad, for instance, it's a brand new for the world. But it could be in another context, in innovation, which is something very well known, but which can be very useful in a poor country. If you take, for instance, a mosquito net with biologically or chemically treated, and you disseminate that in a poor country for fighting against malaria, this is an innovation, and it's important. What matters also for innovation and distinguished from invention, it is disseminated, and that is quite important. So I'm going to, after looking at what is innovation policy with a few slides and design, then I am going to develop the case of three countries, three developing countries, emerging countries, to understand how they have built their own innovation system in view of what I meant into the relationship to a broader societal systems. Some lessons will be derived from that. And then I will end up my discussion, my presentation, by some questions about Mexico. So we spoke about that. And what is important, I summarize this story about innovation policy development, but today what we see is that innovation is becoming the backbone of the development and growth strategies in the knowledge society economy era. Why? It's so important, this notion of knowledge and economy society, and why innovation is the backbone. It's precisely because innovation is the way you convert knowledge into something practical, which has an impact on the life of the people and generate wealth, employment, jobs, and so on. So in this knowledge society, it is really the converter of knowledge into welfare. And that relates to what I was saying about the Russian puppets. You see, the innovation system, which is embodied into the development system, which is itself embodied into the societal system. And it's a design that I made about 12 or 15 years ago, and I've not changed over these 15 years to show that it's really a robust approach to understand notably the issue of the developing countries. And that is the image I was mentioning about the gardening role of the government, which has to fulfill three types of basic three functions. You see the watering, the removing weeds, and the nurturing the soil with in relation to the different aspects of knowledge. And the three functions are explained here. For developing countries, it's particularly important regarding the knowledge base to benefit of foreign direct investments, which comes from multinational cooperation, notably, and through trade and so on. You see the importance for supporting innovative projects about bridge institutions and mechanisms. And I will discuss a bit more about the importance, for instance, for bridging people, the importance of matching funds. Matching funds that, for instance, are given by the government when you want to establish a cooperation between university and industry, and if the business sector is putting, let's say, 50% of the cost of the project, then the government puts the rest of this 50%. And the importance of fighting obstacles to innovation, it is quite fundamental. It is, in fact, the most difficult thing that the government are generally engaged. They don't want really to deal with that. And it is the weakest part of innovation policies, both in developed and developing countries. The other part are more natural. The importance of, in the knowledge process at the macro level, is what is, this notion of technical culture. The technical receptiveness, which is the part regarding the transfer of, you see, 90% of the jobs are not in the high-tech industry. They are in the established industries or established services. And it's a question of receptiveness. So it's a question much more of technical knowledge, technical understanding, which allow you to have improved design and so on, than a matter of fundamental research. It doesn't mean that you should not have research, but you should not forget that most of the jobs are created in this other industry than the high-tech one. It's very important for a good technical education. There are key instruments which are combining the three gardening functions. So you have some dedicated innovation agency. One of the most remarkable is, for instance, the Finnish TECHES. The key thing is that they are playing with multi-tool and multi-target. Because if you have just a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. And precisely, you need to have a flexible approach when you want to support innovators, because they need technical support, they need financial help, they need commercial channels, and so on. And if you have just one simple tool, which is unfortunately the case of many policy instruments established by government, it doesn't work. You have, of course, the large-scale program, that there is no need to speak about typical examples of defense, space, ICT, but you can have that in civil engineering. You have all the industrial policy which are sector-focused action, and here the key thing is building appropriate value chain. And you have also those development of innovative sites with the technopark, the knowledge cities, developing local, in tandem with local and regional governments. The remarkable examples that we were yesterday in Monterey is a good illustration of the type of parks like that. So, coming back to what I was saying and summarizing the story of innovation policy in general, you see that the traditional way was to say, okay, it's just a matter of linking research and industry. But this, in fact, was the initial view, and we have evolved much more with, in fact, this one, which, in fact, innovation policy is positioned in the middle of the other policy departments, and it should stimulate change and facilitate adaptation of these established policies in view of the evolving technologies, the evolving competition which are impacting countries. Now let's come back to precisely the case of developing and emerging countries, and I would like to look to three different cases which are related to very different cultures, which are not the same size, which have not followed the same structural path, but maybe we can derive some more generic lessons. So first, look at the way China has become the world factory. It started, in fact, with relatively good education basis, a strong sense of discipline and hierarchy in view of the way the Chinese society was organized, traditionally, and it had the trauma of the Cultural Revolution. And that is important because often countries really develop something new when they have been impacted in a way or another, in their own identity. And they started in the late 70s after this word by Deng Xiaoping that you know that whatever the color of the cat, what matters is that it catches mouses. Then they begin by authorizing peasants to sell the surplus of their production on the free market, if I may say, on a very small pocket, but it was authorized. And then also the development of town and village enterprises with public-private partnership, a kind of organization between the leader of the village or the cities, which managed to cooperate with some form of private entrepreneurs. Then, in the 80s, they attract foreign direct investment in an experimental manner in special economic zone for local production and export. And that was, in fact, in the 90s, scaled up and quite efficiently, again, on a public-private basis with larger towns. And it was really based on experiment. When it works, then it spread in the continent after being started on the coast. Then, in the 2000s, at the beginning of this century, they begin to invest massively in universities, top level, more than 100, and a large number of them of world class, if possible, research centers. They have a very active policy for attracting diasporas, and notably for publishing in cooperation with the Chinese researchers, which were based in US and so on, and it explained the explosion of scientific publication by China, as was seen in the slide presented just before. And what is behind? This is a real mindset of China, which is made of a sense of experimentation, the kind of patching out culture that in French we have a word which is bricolage, which means you put together things. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit a theoretical design perfect. What matters is that it works practically speaking. And it doesn't matter if it's public-private partnership. It doesn't matter if it's done with some foreign technology that is adapted to some form of Chinese conditions. What matters is that it works. And more important, that it works, that it is true, scientifically true. And the fact of copying what the foreign technology is not an issue, because copying has always been a value in the Chinese culture. And also there was this drive to recovering a position of superpower that used to be throughout history. So then, nevertheless, what about the future? There are still things to be fixed. The framework conditions, notably the institutional aspects related to IPR, to corruption. There is also increasing inequalities in the Chinese societies. And also we see some call for democracy with the development of internet and so on. This is shaking the system and creating some trouble which might prevent future growth in the long term. But we see that there is a gradual approach which has been much related to some form of collective entrepreneurship using public-private plus the foreign enterprise, and also very much shaped by the mindset and the culture of the country. Let's look to the second case, which is Morocco. Morocco has started really to build up a modern economy about 10 years ago. It's quite an elitist society with some form of dualism, with a large part of the population which is illiterate, but a top level which is very well educated, notably in relation to the education they got in the top French school and universities. But there is a serious trade deficit with a poor capacity of export except phosphate, which is Morocco is the main world producer. There has been recently, over the last 5 years, a strong political pressure, which has been aggravated with the Arab Spring, and that led recently the king to engage a democratization process, giving to the parliament more power, and having a head of government which is more independent from the palace and the king. How they managed throughout these 10 years to start a modernized economy. The first main step was the deregulation of the telecom market, and notably to provide two operators a global license, which helped to have a low tariff for mobile phone. And that was important for dynamizing the society. So they also introduced a university reform with the system which was put in Europe with the Bologna process with licensed master doctorate, and they copied it in 2003. And then they have launched a series of plans, quite large sectoral plans, in emerging industries, agriculture, ICT, and so on, and also initiated several technological sites, technopoles, notably in the field of ICTs near the big city like Casablanca. And they have improved the business climate, notably over the last 2-3 years, and they've been, in fact, the most important reports in the Doing Business Challenge book of the World Bank, if you look at it in the recent years. All that was possible because there was this leadership of the king and the palace, but also a very strong engineer corps, organized in the French style, which was very strongly linked to the business community and to the king entourage. And that, in fact, made them some ability to design and manage large-scale projects for notably those sectoral plans, building infrastructure and so on. So you see also, once again, a collective entrepreneurship which is itself shaped by the society, the way the society has been built throughout history, and so on. Nevertheless, there are some persisting issues, because this type of organization is also good for typical departmental fiefdom, in which the different powers, in fact, share the cake, if I may say. There is a corruption trend which is not easy to curb for a number of good reasons. And there is still a major problem with the education. And that was largely due to the decision in the early 80s to forget completely the learning process, which was based on largely on education, on French, and decide to make it, in fact, totally in Arab. And the problem with the Arab is that first there is a dialectal Arabs, which is different from the classic Arab, and that is quite a step process to learn. And secondly, they need, nevertheless, to have French later on for communicating on the international arena, and notably when they reach the secondary and the tertiary level. And if it's not mastered, it's a problem, or they need English. But the English is not also not well mastered. So the consequence of this process of massive Arabization is that destabilize the whole education system, and to come back to something now and to put that back on the right tracks takes, in fact, years. So that is an important issue. But of course, there is a change also as a result of the democratization process with the Islamic government which is coming in. It's very important that Morocco succeed because, in fact, it's an important stabilizer of whole change in the Arab world. Let's look quickly to Burkina Faso and how it gets out of poverty. And in fact, Burkina is quite a progressive country, very poor, but they are well organized, with good cadre, which were partly trained on the French style, École Nationale d'Administration. It is exactly the same. They follow very well the international community instructions. They benefit a lot of foreign support. And this, in fact, made them able to develop appropriate policies, notably focus on some sector for growth, to deal notably with agriculture and so on. Nevertheless, there are a few basic issues. The first is the low literacy, which is still there, and this low literacy is also created by an issue related to language. What is clear is that you need to learn in local language in the very early years. And that would be very good to use the Burkina-based language, despite there are 3 basic languages that it's enough for managing. But because they want to stay like the noble class, they obliged the children to learn French. And then after that, it creates a lot of tension into the society, and that is preventing, in fact, the good learning process in the rest of the years. So this is an issue to be solved, which is related to, I would say, a bad negotiation of the decolonization process. Then you have the question of the rural development, which has been completely neglected. They are now interested in agriculture, but they neglected rural development, and that's because the fault of the international organization who said extension service and so on, that doesn't work, let's give that to the private agents to do it. They were totally unable to do it precisely, the private agents. And the consequence is that those who are doing the real agent of development in the countryside are the Catholic priests, which are there and taking care of helping agriculture producers, healthcare, and taking care of the small community. And the question of the business climate, there the issue is notably some improvement, but the main issue is the court. And the traditional court we choose to function, but the type of modern court that the international organization try to impose doesn't work. Because